in technology, and then one is good at producing a type of good, and then the other one is good at producing the other type of goods. And then if they specialize their productions and then they start trading, then they can bring down the price of goods they produce, and then that will allow them to consume more stuff, right? Once they trade, and this is the source of gain from trade, right? People specialize in what they're good at, specialize in technology that they can use best to produce the good. And then the other, excuse me, the other source of gain from trade is endowment, right? Like if you have more stuff to produce certain goods, for example, if you have a lot of natural resources, if you have oil under the ground, then you know that, well, I have more oil than you do under my ground, so maybe I can specialize on oil production, and then well, I can produce oil cheaper, so I sell the oil to you, and you sell whatever you do to me. So basically, this is the idea, right? Trade is gonna be good because a country can specialize on whatever they have, or whatever the things that they have that they can use to use it for production, right? So that they can produce things cheaply. So this is the idea, right? So technology or endowment and different things. International trade can reduce the price of the traded goods, and people can earn more, right? People can earn more money, basically, if they trade. So now we are looking at another perspective, like another aspect that international trade can also benefit consumers of different countries, the trading partners. And now economic of scale, and this is another aspect that we are going to look at. What is economic of scale, by the way? Well, the scale effect, the more you do, the better you are, and the cheaper you can make something. All right, the scale effect. Okay. Any questions? All right. Learning objects. We quickly go through this. Recognize why international trade often occurs from increasing return to scale. Understand the differences between internal and external economy of scale. Yeah, there's difference. There's internal economy of scale, external economy of scales. And then discuss the sources of external economy, and also discuss the role of external economies and knowledge spillover in shaping comparative advantage and international trade patterns. Okay, introduction. All right, so what we have discussed so far, we base on the assumption that the model of comparative advantage is assumed to be constant, okay? And we have the constant return to scale setup, all right? So maybe some of you might ask me the questions, why we have this kind of different setups and these different assumptions in economics, and why not just be real, right? Like is this assumptions realistic and things like that? But let me tell you this. All these assumptions are possible, okay? And they can be true for something. They may not be true for everything, okay? So for example, constant return to scale may be true for some industry, but it may not be true to some other industry, okay? So for example, if you have agricultural land and then you want to increase the output, And I can imagine the more farmers you put into the field, probably the output will be scalable, right? Like constant scalable to the number of farmers you put on the field. One farmer produce this much, two farmer produce that much, it doubles, right? So constant return to scale. But it may not be true for other industries, and maybe the more workers you put in to work on something, then the production's output might be more than the input. It can be true for some industry, and we are going to look at that. When that happens, and the analysis is going to be a little bit different. So returning to the questions, why we have different setups, and the answer is that we want to analyze one thing, and what is the impact of that thing on economic welfare. And then in order to do that, because there's so many things in the real world that can be noise. And and if you say that, well, what happened if this is happening, right? What happened to my welfare? And when something happens, that can impact on many things, right? Many things, and then you do not really know exactly what kind of effect is coming from that thing, right? So in order to simplify our analysis, just focusing on that things, we tend to the easy way to do that is to we assume everything else is unchanged. And what happens is if only that thing is happening, right? What is the impact from that thing, from that policy or that shock, right? This is how we can simplify the world to understand the impact of something. Okay. So the purpose is to understand the impact of a particular thing on economic outcome. And now what we are going to do is that we're going to relax, right? The constant return to scale assumption. We're gonna look at what happened if we have a different return to scale. Suppose now we have an increasing return to scale. Okay, so what happened to to uh, to the welfare when we have international trade? Okay, so the definition here formally we go through it. When inputs to an industry increase at a certain rate, the output increases at the same rate. This is constant return to scale. But there may be increasing return to scale or economies of scale. This means that when input to an industry increase at a certain rate, the output increases at a faster rate. Okay? A larger scale is more efficient. The cost per units of output falls as a firm or industry increases output. All right. So I'm trying to give you maybe one or two examples to help you to understand this idea. Um, all right. So imagine if you have a bakery. A bakery is where you see all this bread people selling in the shop, right? They make bread, cake, and some anyway. So those kind of thing, pastry, right? Now, so if you so what it means by cost per unit of output falls as the firm or industry increases output. So if you have a bakery, so you have to buy machines, right? Like ovens, machines, and furnitures to sell your breads. And so the cost of bread is the material cost plus all these rental costs, right? You have to, suppose you have to pay rents for the shop. You have to pay interest rate for the machines you have in the shop, right? So those are the costs for your business, okay? And also plus the flour, the sugars, and the yeast, everything that you have to use for making your bread. So those are the variable costs. Okay. So the average cost of the bread is basically how much bread you make. So the total cost plus the variable cost. And the total cost, so sorry, the fixed cost plus the variable cost, that's total cost, right? Total cost divided by the number of bread you sell is the average cost. So basically, the more bread you make, the higher the variable cost is gonna be, because the more bread you make, you're gonna buy more flour, you're gonna put more flours into it, right? More sugar, more yeast. However, the rental doesn't change. When you rent a shop for a month, it doesn't matter how many breads you are making. The rent is rent, right? It's a fixed cost you have to pay. So in that case, if you're making more bread, the rent cost share on each bread drops. It's gonna be cheaper, right? If you are paying $2,000 a month and you are only producing one bread, so the cost for that bread is very expensive, because you pay $2,000 rental, and then suppose $1 is the material cost. So the cost of bread is $2,001, right? But if you produce two breads, that means you have $2 of material cost and plus 2,000, right? And it costs you $2,002. But you have two breads, so the average cost of bread is gonna be $1,001. So it's cheaper, right? It's cheaper. So the more you produce, the lower the average cost is going to be. So this is kind of what I'm trying to say here. Is the larger scale, the cheaper it's going to be for each bread. Okay, another example, if I can think of quickly, it can be suppose um, if you have workers and working and if you have like suppose if you have more worker working in your in the company, and then it's more likely that one person can come up with a better idea of how to run things, and then this person can share with everyone else uh, their new idea, their experience, and then that can help to increase the efficiency of the company, right? The more people you have in the company, it's more likely one of them is going to come up with a better idea of how to run things, and that will help you to reduce the cost of the business. Okay, let's get with that. So with this idea, we're going to look at how that will improve international trade, why international trade will make sense, and that will be good for the welfare of every country. Now, let's look at the example that the textbook gives us. For example, suppose an industry produces widgets using only one input, labor, and consider how the amount of labor required depends on the number of widgets produced. The presence of economy of scales may be seen from the fact that doubling the input of labor will more than double the output of the industry's output. The average amount of labor used to produce each widget is less when the industry produces more. So numerically, that's how it can be represented. So if you have 10 total labor input and you only produce 5 units, so average labor input is 2. So you need 2 labor for one output. But as you expand the number of workers, the output expands faster. So eventually here you only need 1.167 units of labor for 1 unit of output. So this is how you can decrease the cost required to produce one output. Okay. Mutually beneficial trade can arise as a result of economies of scale. Everyone is going to be benefit from having economies of scale because suppose let's combine these two ideas together. So in the past, we have the example that um, if you have some type of technology that allow you to produce one thing, and I have a different type of technology that allow me to be better in producing another thing, and then we both specialize, right? We both specialize in that thing. I specialize what I'm good at doing. You specialize what you are good at doing, and then we trade. This is good for us, right? Good for both of us. But we haven't considered the fact that there could be economies of scale. So, for example, there's another dimension, another level of gain from trade if economy scale exists. For example, you are good at producing something, right? So I let you to do whatever you are good at. Once you specialize, you will achieve the economy of scale because you are producing more of that thing. So once you produce more, you may even you can be benefit from the technology and also you can benefit from your experience. For example, maybe your experience will actually help you to produce even more over time because you learn, right? You have some better technology on something, and when you produce, when you start producing, you start learning how to do that, and you can improve over time as you accumulate more knowledge. All right, so you will be even better and better, and this is what I mean by international. I mean economies of scale. All right, so international trade permits, that means international trade allows each country to produce a limited range of goods, means specializations, right? Without sacrificing variety in consumption because they start trading. And with trade, a country can take advantage of economies of scale. Once you specialize, you're gonna produce certain things, and you will become better and better, even better on producing that thing. So you will become more efficient than if you try to produce everything yourself. All right. So basically, we are adding another dimension to the games of trade. So if you don't consider about economies of scale, you may be underestimating the gain from trade, from specialization. Maybe there's more because there is economy of scale. All right. Now we are looking at two different economy of scales. One is external economy of scale. The other one is internal economy of scale. Let's look at the definition. So economies of scale could mean either that larger firms or larger industries would be more efficient. External economy of scale happens when costs per unit of output depends on the size of the industry. Okay, so think about you are just part of the industry. Okay, you are part of the industry, and then you will be benefit. Your costs will benefit if the industry is large. So imagine if you um, if you are running a restaurant in a in a building in a shopping mall where there's so many restaurants there. Okay, so what will happen is that uh, suppose there are so many restaurants in the area, and you are basically you are located in an area where all these different food court, these different restaurants are gathering. Okay, and how can you be benefit from this kind of setup? Well, this makes sense, right? Like when you go to a tourist place, when you go to um, when you are visiting some restaurant, you usually see that the restaurants are gathering with a lot of other restaurants and not just one restaurant. You don't really see. I mean, you can still see, but you usually find that uh, restaurants like to gather together in certain places, right? Like there's an area or district of nightclubs or bars, and there's a district of restaurants, right? And there are districts of car dealerships and things like that, right? So business, the same type of business, they like to gather together because of external economy scale. And why do they do that? Imagine if you are located in the center of kind of like a restaurant district, and then there might be because there are suppliers like vegetable suppliers, meat suppliers, seafood suppliers. They know that the area has a lot of restaurants, so they may be providing more different type of variety of goods, and then they can even make it cheaper for you too because that area has a lot of sales when they prepare their agricultural goods like vegetables, shrimp, seafood, and different things to that area. They know that they're gonna buy a lot because lots of restaurant there. They will ship a lot because when they ship a lot, they can bring down the cost of every train that carry from the ocean to the restaurant area, right? So so you will be benefit by having cheaper material costs because you are in an area where they have a lot of this kind of food supplies, right? One idea is this. Well, internal economies of scale happens when the cost per unit of output depends on the size of the firm. Larger the size, as we discussed before, the larger the size, the more you produce, then the fixed cost will be lower, right? I mean, fixed cost is not lower, but the fixed cost shared by each unit of output will be lower. The more bread you produce, then the average cost will be lower, okay? Because you're paying the rent anyway. You're paying the shops, the rental of the shops. You are paying the interest on the machines. You are renting to make bread. Those are the fixed costs. But the more you produce, the better, right? You're paying the same thing anyway. It's gonna be cheaper for you to produce more, to utilize or take advantage of this fixed cost better. All right. And also, there's another benefit when you have a large size firms too. Suppose you are Walmart, okay? You know Walmart, right? You know Costco, you know Sam's, and you know these big shops, right? Like the big one. So if you are Walmart, you buy you buy toothpaste or you buy a rice cooker, for example, to sell in your shop. So when you go to a manufacturer, you go to a rice cooker manufacturer, you tell them, I'm gonna uh, get your rice cooker on my shop's shelf, all right? And I'm going to order 3 million units of it every month. So imagine if you order 3 million units, you are going to get a very good price. If comparing to me, if I just run a small shops, okay, a small tiny shop that run by myself, and then I also want to sell the same rice cooker as Walmart, and when I go to a manufacturer, I tell them I'm gonna sell this rice cookers at my shop, and I order 10 units of it every month. So if how much price you can bargain down when you only order 10 units, right? So it's always good to be big because the bargaining power is more. Okay, let's have a quick break, and then we'll be back to pick up from here. 10 minutes break